This is from the Gita, and it's called The Inward Journey. This passage is from the 6th chapter. Sequestered should he sit, steadfastly meditating, solitary, his thoughts controlled, his passions laid away, from every craving for possessions freed. The devotee must take time occasionally to be alone with God. Only as his awareness deepens of God's silent inner presence can the waves of his mental and emotional restlessness be stilled and the boat of his life be steered serenely to the divine shores. Paramahansa Yogananda often said, seclusion is the price of greatness. How long ought one to sit in meditation? A good rule is to meditate as long as one can do so with joy or with keen interest and alert attention. One ought never to sit long hours merely to test his endurance, nor ought one to sit long if it means meditating absent-mindedly. Far more important than the duration of meditation is its intensity. Absent-mindedness and what Paramahansa Yogananda called lackluster devotion are formidable barriers to spiritual progress. Even 5 minutes of deep meditation would be preferable to sitting a whole hour if all one did during that hour was watch the clock. In fact, a good practice is to sit as though the time available were indeed only 5 minutes. From the moment you assume your meditative posture, enter at once into the heart of your spiritual practices. Resolutely set aside all restless thoughts. Refuse to move even a muscle. Discipline your body, your mind, your emotions. Offer them up to God. Concentrate your entire being on the upward flow of your spiritual aspiration. An hour, indeed, is little enough time out of the day to give to God. What if He were to forget you for even a second? You would cease to exist. Think how many hours one gives to sleep every night. The commonly recommended norm is 8 hours, though in fact one can get by on fewer. For another 8 hours, more or less, one works. This leaves another 8 hours for eating, for talking with others, for traveling to and from work, for relaxation. Out of this third segment, can we not set aside at least 1 or 2 hours for God? And out of the 8 hours people devote to subconscious sleep, can they not devote 1 or 2 to the much deeper rest of superconsciousness? The sincere seeker should make it a practice to meditate at least 1.5 hours every day. Better still, he should make it 1.5 hours twice a day. This recommendation, however, is for those especially in whom the meditative habit is already established. Beginners generally would do well to meditate less. They should discipline themselves first to intensity. Only after achieving intensity will they find long meditation beneficial. In any case, one should allow his taste for meditation to grow naturally. Never should he force it. The more deeply he experiences divine joy in his soul, the more he will want to meditate deeply and long. He won't need urging from anyone. The longer he meditates with deep concentration, at that point, the better. Even the meditative novice finds that he can relate better to others and understand and help them more deeply. Meditation even intensifies the enjoyment one experiences through the senses. After deep meditation, the world seems filled with new wonder and beauty. Colors appear more intense. Music thrills one more deeply. One returns to outward awareness far more refreshed than after a deep sleep. And all things seem vibrant with joy, the more one deeply lives in the joy of God within. The more deeply one lives in the joy of God within. The first step toward divine union is to spend some time with God every day, sequestered, as the Gita puts it here, one's thoughts controlled, one's passions stilled. This is the inward pilgrimage. It is the straight and narrow path to liberation. Thus, through the Bhagavad Gita, God has spoken to mankind.
And now I'll read from the Bible. Yoganandaji would read one passage from the Bible and one passage from the Bhagavad Gita, two related passages. And our Param Guru, Swami Sri Yukteswarji, he wrote The Holy Science, which compares the two scriptures. It was a mission that that Babaji gave Sri Yukteswarji to do, to draw the parallels between the East and the West. So that's why every week, for those of you who are new, we read from both passages, both scriptures. So this passage, it comes from the Gospel of St. John, chapter 4, verses 23 and 24. Let me get my glasses on. The hour cometh, and now is, when true worshippers shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Swamiji writes this commentary: to worship God in spirit and in truth means to commune with him in inner silence. Jesus' message here is unequivocal, especially when it is seen in context, for he was replying to a question put to him by the woman of Samaria, who had asked him to tell her in what place it was better to worship God, in Samaria or in Jerusalem. Jesus made it clear in his reply that one should worship God above all inwardly, and outwardly only as an expression of inner devotion. It wasn't that he denied the value of outward worship. He was saying, rather, that the benefits of worship of all kinds depend on the depth of feeling a person infuses into his devotions. Traditions may be found in every religion to the effect that holy vibrations exist in certain places on earth. These vibrations may be attuned historically to the fact that miracles have been performed there, or to the one-time presence of great masters, or they may simply be the result of centuries of devout worship in those places. Once a place becomes impregnated with spiritual power, its vibrations may linger on for centuries. Jesus himself met the woman of Samaria at Jacob's well, an ancient site that was still considered holy in his day. Yet his reply to her contained a universal teaching. Believe me, the hour cometh, when ye shall neither in this mountain nor yet in Jerusalem worship the Father. Outward pilgrimage, he was saying, without corresponding inner communion with God, is of only temporary value. The important thing is our inner relationship with the Lord. When visiting holy places, we should tune in sensitively to their vibrations and maintain a deeply prayerful attitude. Our heart's feelings must be stilled to receive divine blessings. Thus we may in fact gain lasting benefits from pilgrimage. Above all, however, what Jesus recommended was the pilgrimage to our divine source within. Wherever the body is, what we must do is worship the Father in spirit and in truth. We should make a portable altar of our hearts. Outward pilgrimage may help to reinforce and deepen our attunement with God, but his favorite altar is the heart purified, cleansed of attachment and desire, uplifted to his love. To worship God in spirit means to rise above body consciousness. This one does in deep meditation. To worship God in truth means not to remain satisfied with mere intellectual concepts about him, nor yet to accept the cloudy, illusory visions and inspirations that well up from the subconscious. To worship him in truth means to persist in meditation until he lifts us into actual ecstatic communion with him. The validity of superconscious experience can be tested and verified by every sincere devotee. It will have transforming power over his life. divine experience, unlike the shadowy mental images that are inspired by subconsciousness, and unlike the passing peace one feels in holy places, leaves nothing and no one that touches ever the same again. Jesus here is then saying, if you want to be the kind of worshiper that God himself is seeking out of his vast family of devotees, set aside time every day for direct, superconscious contact with him in meditation. Enter into the silence of inner divine communion. The holiest of holies is the inner sanctuary of the heart. Thereon should be kept ever burning the sacred lamp of fervent devotion to the Lord. Thus, through the Holy Bible, God has spoken to mankind. Om. 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 Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. So, I should turn it up. So, you're going to do the talk? Okay.
Well, so nice to see you, and so nice to see how the yogis multiply during the during the reading and the chanting, and then many souls gather. It's so nice to see you all. Who is that behind Mary? Is that Tulasi? Yes. Lean the other way. Okay. Just we like to. Yes, you. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Come closer to Radhika. We want to see you all, and we can't turn our heads. It doesn't help. So. We really get in this these two readings, in some way it's the whole summary of evolution on the spiritual path. Especially in our childhood, we may grow up going to a church or going to temples. We may, as especially popular, which is a custom, or not a custom, but a hobby I applaud, of going on pilgrimages. It's almost as if everybody has a little card and you check off all the temples. Well, I did Rameshwaram, and okay, well, now I went to Nagarkol, and so you collect all the temples that you can go to take the blessings. Of course, this is a wonderful thing that we should do, and it's justified in the reading. But we also come to realize in time that what we might have a particularly wonderful experience at a temple, and then we may go to another temple and not have the same experience. Or we may go back to the same temple and find that somehow what happened before didn't happen this time. And we start to realize that this kind of experience really depends more on my consciousness and my receptivity and openness to what's being offered. We would experience this even in Swami Kriyanandaji's presence. Most of the time, when we were in our right state of minds, just the sight of him would you would feel such joy. You would feel the energy rise, and it was thrilling. And then sometimes, though, if we were coming to see him in a group, say, and we were in a mood, we'd kind of come in and just kind of... And I would always know something was wrong, because there he is, and I usually feel uplifted when he's there, and I don't. And it's not because he's not radiating today. The sun is out, but the curtains of my heart are slammed shut. So what can I do to open that? We find that too even when we come, maybe even to the center, that we come to the center and, it takes a little while to sort of blow the fog out of our minds, or to sort of take the armor off of our hearts that has had to be there the whole day so we could get through breakfast. But then once we're out of the house and in the center, then we can start to relax and open up again. And the thing is that as we start to discover that this is really an inner experience, we find that we can have that inner experience at temples and sacred places, but we can also have it just in our own home, in our own selves. But though we may find that I like being alone with God, sitting in silence, or reading scripture, or chanting, or maybe watching devotional programs, that In the same way as sometimes a pilgrimage works, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes these things work, and sometimes they don't. And that though we might hear, like say a chant, and it's very deeply devotionally inspiring, we may find that on the next day that just the same chant doesn't work for whatever reason. And we begin to realize that the way we can go deepest, the way that brings the most results, is when we begin to meditate. That even if the meditations themselves are filled with joy, even if they're not filled with joy, somehow we have a more consistent success rate of being cheerful afterwards or being calm afterwards. You may find that even a useless seeming meditation where all I did was kind of just Hong Sa, and just we get all spacey and think that meditation wasn't even worth the time I put into it, that nevertheless our day goes better. We may have a very difficult day and we find that somehow we can handle it. Or we find that somehow we're in tune with life, that we're in harmony with the flow of life that day. And sometimes we joke that gravity seems a little bit lighter. Gravity isn't so heavy on a day that we meditate. And but once then we compare it to when we don't meditate, and we find gravity is back again in full force, even stronger sometimes. Hard to move one leg in front of the other. And so the Gita reading gives us all the guidance on how we should meditate, and it's wonderful to get clarity on that. And Swamiji expands on that to say, listen, on the one hand, don't meditate to sacrifice quality in favor of quantity. Master had a disciple who was living in the ashram, and she came downstairs, and he said to her, "You didn't meditate this morning." And she said, "Sir, I meditated a whole hour." And he said, "You should have meditated half an hour." And his teaching generally was not meditate less. But in her case, he could see that really that hour was not spent completely focused. And that in her case, she would have done well to focus for a shorter amount of time. Swamiji says there, meditate as if you only have 5 minutes. And that may have been a reference to a story of, there was a monk living with Swamiji. Of course, they were monks together. And Swamiji had to go out, and he was going to take this monk with him. And he said, "Listen, we have to go, so you'll have to just have a short meditation," because they were going during their normal meditation time. He was going to only be able to meditate 5 minutes. And so the monk, his brother monk, came out of the meditation 5 minutes later and said, "That was such a deep meditation." And Swamiji said, "That's because you knew you had such a short amount of time, so you really put yourself into it." He said, "We don't want to meditate for an hour, just kind of starting out going, well, I've got lots of time. Let me first sift through my to-do list and see which things I can check off. And then, there was that one interaction." And then he says, you sort of look at your watch and say, "Holy smoke, 5 minutes left." Trying to go deep into it. And so he said we should start right away, full on. And that's, of course, why chanting is helpful. Chanting helps us to open our hearts, a prayer, maybe an inspiring reading. We can ask for help. Above all, remember Master's advice to his disciples, never meditate by yourself. And one of his disciples asked the obvious question, "Sir, what if I am alone?" And Master said, "Am I not always with you?" And in fact, we see that even though we come from pilgrimages to different kinds of inspirational practices on our own too, the inner pilgrimage of meditation, that even then we can go deeper and we need more help, and because it's hard to do it on our own. First of all, it's nice to have a good technique to know how to meditate and how to really use, as Swamiji suggests, that hour and a half, to use it constructively. But then also we know that we need help, and that's when we come to the search for a guru. And the Guru helps us, yes, by giving us teachings, yes, by giving us the special techniques and so on. But above all, the Guru really does, the greatest gift he gives us is his own spiritual power. And so as much as we are open to that, then we can draw from that. And so it's not that the Guru only wants to give us a little bit, but he'll only give us as much as we ourselves want. But the other way the Guru gives us his power is by his example. And this is really what has been so inspiring. As you all know, yesterday, or 2 days ago, your time, was the birthday of Swami Kriyanandaji, May 19th. And here at Ananda Village, we have been celebrating his birthday with the celebration itself, which I think some of you saw online. Did you see the broadcast yesterday morning? Can you raise your hand if you saw some of the broadcast Saturday morning? Okay, very good. So that was Swamiji's birthday celebration, but also this is part of a weekend retreat for Kriya Bandhs, Kriya Yogis, people who have taken Kriya initiation. And so it's classes on the Kriya technique. There was a Kriya initiation this evening. And so it's an annual time that everybody in America gathers together to go deeper into Kriya. And so this technique of Kriya is a great gift. It's the gift that Babaji gave to Lahiri Mahashaya to give to the whole world. And it's very, very powerful and very deep. Those of you who have the technique, of course, know what I mean. Those who are working towards initiation, remember, as you can get your strength and meditation up, then your meditation time up to, in fact, that hour and a half that Swamiji mentions, you can prepare yourself for Kriya. Remember also, though, that once you take Kriya initiation, the Kriya technique itself makes it easier to meditate longer. So you're building up your strength, but then once you get Kriya, it will help you meditate longer and more deeply, even more so. And so it's been beautiful to have meditations focused on Kriya and people really coming together to rededicate themselves, because really, what else are we here for? As you know, one round of Kriya, which takes 30 seconds to practice, gives you 1 year potentially of spiritual growth. And so in a meditation, you can knock out up to 108 years, up to a whole lifetime of growth, spiritual growth, of burning up karma. Whether you get exactly a year on each Kriya, we can't say. But what we can say is that as people practice, their faces just become brighter and brighter. It's true of meditation, it's true of the other techniques as well. It's true of discipleship. It is especially true, I must say, though, of Kriya. You just see how it changes people. And you see the light come into their eyes more. It's beautiful to come back to Ananda Village every year and see everyone with 1 more year of Kriya practice under their belt, so to speak. And you just see everyone looking brighter and brighter, their eyes very clear. I joke, but it's not a complete joke, that every time I come back, everybody looks 1 year younger. It's just because you can see more and more their energy rising. Kriya works very effectively on clearing out the blocks. But I have to say also that it must be practiced with devotion. It's not just a mechanical technique that we can just run through and hope. Nothing that we can do really for God we can do mechanically and get very far. It has to be done with devotion, with a sense of self-offering. And so the other thing I just wanted to close with was this thought of how the Guru helps us. Yes, he helps us through his power. Yes, he helps us by his giving these techniques, but he also helps us by his example. And we had that in our own lives in the example of Master, through his writings, through people's writings about him, especially Swamiji's. But we also had the example of Swami Kriyananda himself. At the end of his life, he said, I don't know where Yogananda ends and Kriyananda begins. And he said, as I try to model my life after Masters, consciously, to live as he lived as best as I can, I find myself growing very quickly. And so we saw in Swamiji, in fact, it's beautiful that for his birthday, the affirmation that we did was kindness. Because once an interviewer asked him near the end of his life, what is your legacy? He went on to describe certain things, but he said, first, I would like my legacy to be kindness. A spirit of kindness towards one another. And he exemplified that in his life. We found it again and again, how kind, how patient he was. Sometimes he could be quite strong, but it was again because he was kind enough to want to help. Instead of saying, well, you've got a bunch of problems, but those are your problems. It's not my problems. He cared. And so the beautiful thing about an example like his is that once we saw that it could be done, then it set the standard very high for each one of us. That if we only can look as high as we can see, and then to us that's the biggest thing we've seen. It's nice if you go near the mountains, if you've ever had this experience in seeing the mountains from afar, especially if there's clouds or something, people will say, oh look, there's the mountains, and if you're not used to it, I found this, I'll look up and say, where? And they'll say, no, look up. And oh my gosh, so much higher in the sky than we're used to looking. And that's really what the Guru is for us. He shows us the mountain. He is the mountain. And he therefore proves to us that it can be done. It is possible to be kind. It is possible to be patient. It is possible to be brave. It is possible to give love without caring if that love comes back to you from that person or from that situation. That we find more joy in giving. As Swamiji said, kindness is its own reward. That we would rather feel that kindness flowing through us. And when we then also look for, yes, but are you kind to me? The heart has a pinch. And we also find ourselves hungry. Just, I gave a lot of friendship, but I don't have much back, and so I'm hungry for some friendship. Will you give it to me? Will you give it to me? And you, I've given a lot to, so I think I'm owed at least an appetizer or a starter friendship, something. And we find that then we're always hungry, looking to others to satisfy that. It's natural, which is to say it's common. Don't feel badly, we all are still working on ourselves. But when we find that friendship inside, when we find that kindness inside, through our meditation, through our Kriya, through our connection to the Guru, then we find ourselves fed all the time. And then we can share that with others without feeling that hunger ourselves. So, God bless you all, and it's such a joy to see you.
Hello everyone, so nice to see you all. Gosh, I really liked what Dharmarajan said. Maybe I don't need to say anything more. That was really good. I'll just talk a little bit. One of the things that being able to meditate and tune into the unseen allows us to do is to transcend the material, mundane world. And that sounds theoretical, but there are so many instances of where we need to learn to transcend. And I'll give a few examples. Well, first I'll take the most extreme. There's quite a few books out there of people who, during World War II, were either Jewish or were somehow persecuted in some way at the concentration camps. And there are many, many stories of people who were able to survive that concentration camp of beatings and starvation and everything, and they were able to tune into God inside. And by tuning into God inside, they were able to make it. And not only that, when they came out of that experience, they were able to survive emotionally also, which after going through an experience like that, it would be very difficult to not just be stuck in depression because of what one went through, but to be able to transcend and see life as lessons karma that comes to us, to be able to have that bigger picture view. That is transcendence. And it's very, very important. I just saw a very touching documentary. It was a bit difficult to watch, but it was similar to these people who survived the Holocaust. It was a young journalist. His name was Jim Foley, and he was murdered by the Muslim extremists in Syria a few years ago. But I didn't know his story at all. I just knew when I was in the U.S., I believe it happened while we were in the U.S., that this young man, and I did not watch the video, but these people murdered him on a video to horrify the public and to intimidate and scare people. And the young man, Jim, was forced to read something that denounced Western society, as they do, and then he was put to death. And all we knew was that he was a photojournalist, and his goal in life was to kind of show what was happening behind the scenes with his photography in parts of the world where no one was allowed to witness what was actually going on. It would be as if someone was taking photos during World War II and Hitler didn't know about it. And so it's the same thing where these people, aim to take these photos to show the rest of the world of what's going on, to help reveal that, so that something can be done to help the people that are being persecuted. So anyway, they specifically did not like journalists, and that's why they were taking journalists hostage and still do. And he had a friend. They together got captured, and they got thrown in a jail cell with a whole bunch of other guys from other parts of the world. Jim and his friend were American. Well, actually, no, his friend wasn't American either. I think he was the only American. And because Americans can be so aggressive in the world, I think Jim became a target more than the other people. But everyone got their dose of beating every day, their starvation. And so during this documentary, they interviewed all those who were hostages with Jim. And it turns out that Jim uplifted everybody. He had a very strong faith in God. And so they would all get beaten, and Jim would say, "Are you okay?" to someone else. And whereas if food came into the cell, people would hoard the food. Jim would share the food that he got with others and say, no, I don't need as much. When he first got there, clothing, it was also another thing to hoard. And he had an extra pair of pants, and it was cold. And he gave the extra pair of pants to someone, and they were so appreciative. And they talked about how just 5 minutes after the beatings, his face would be calm again, and he would tune into the presence of God. And sometimes it was, they could see out the window a little bit, and he would see the sunset or the sunrise, or be able to see a bird fly by. But he was able to transcend above this. And then after, I don't remember how many years he was hostage, it was a few. Slowly but surely, because they were all held for ransom as well, one by one, the prisoners were given back to their families in other countries. And it came down to just Jim and one other guy. And this other guy, I don't think it was German, he might have been Dutch. And Jim gave him a letter and said, "Please give this to my family in case I don't make it." And his friend said he was too afraid to take the letter with him, so he memorized it. And he did a very good job of memorizing that letter, because if the letter would have been found on him, Jim would have been punished. And so he memorized that letter so that when they left when this last prisoner besides Jim left, he was able to relay this message that Jim had told his family, which was that every day I feel close to you in prayer. And every day I feel the blessings of God in my life, even though I'm going through this. And I had a thought about him. I wondered, because he, of course, was the last one left and they murdered him on the video. I really wondered if he had prayed to God that he be the one that be killed to save everybody's life. He was such a saintly person. And we can only hope that when we are in such difficult circumstances, that we too could help uplift others. Sometimes when I'm on an airplane, they say that when you take off and land in an airplane, that's the most difficult time for the airplane, physics-wise and everything. It's the most unstable part of the flight. And so we both make sure to pray during that time. And sometimes I can't help it. I'll just visualize what would happen if this plane was going to crash. And, could I be, someone to help others as opposed, I don't mean a hero. I just mean someone who could be positive and help others, as opposed to just screaming at the top of my lungs, oh my God, we're all going to die! It's interesting as a yogi to think about these things. And, transcendence doesn't have to be so extreme either. Transcendence can be in smaller things, when we have friendships with others and we have difficulties with each other. One of the things that happens in spiritual community, and the longer we get to know each other, the less we are no longer strangers of each other. And I don't know if you've heard, familiarity can breed contempt. Have you heard that before? Familiarity with others can breed contempt. That happens in families very often, blood family, where when we're together in a blood family, we're kind of at our lowest energy-wise. It's like, I'm laying on the couch, get out of my way. I'm watching the TV, hey, and people tease each other and, nag each other. Why don't you just do something better with your life? I wish you would do this with your life instead of that. And that comes from a low energy state. Think about when we are most annoyed by other people. It's when our energy is low. And this happens in blood families. And we get really comfortable and really subconscious with each other. And Dharmarajan is laughing. And but that's not good. Because what happens? People take on roles in a family when that happens. Oh, you're the youngest one. You'll never grow up. You'll never learn the right. Oh, you're the oldest one. You're such a fuddy-duddy. I don't know if you've heard that term before, but you just want things your way all the time. Or, oh, that's Auntie, Rama, we know her. I don't mean our Rama, but I was just saying a word, just that's that Auntie. We know what she's all about. She just comes here and we know what to expect. Or this person is that way, and yeah, I have it all figured out. You're that way, you're this way, you're that way. That's how you are. And that's a low energy way of relating to other people. And then we find in spiritual family, sometimes we have closer friendships, sometimes farther friendships. Swamp Master said that if you want to find spiritual friends, you can pray and find those spiritual friends. But if there's difficulty and conflict between you, then you weren't always friends in past lives. At times you might have been enemies. And when we're enemies as Gurubhais, we need to work through that. Because what happens when we're enemies with other people, we have an attachment to not liking someone. And when we have an attachment, what happens? We come back again. We want to get rid of our attachments. And so it's very important that we not lower our energy in spiritual family and become so comfortable that it becomes okay to just tease each other or put each other in a box or demand behavior out of other people to be a certain way, or, things that are outside of ourselves. I often say, you're probably sick of hearing me say this, but Ananda is not a social club. I've said it many times before. Nor is it like a blood family. And I should make that clear. Ananda is a spiritual family, which means that there's mutual respect between others. That we give each other the space to grow beyond who we met them in the first place. Suppose I would hate to be with me 25 years ago. I think back to how I was new on the spiritual path, and I'm like, how did the people that were on the path longer than me put up with me? I don't know how they did, And I was talking to a friend who I've known for 25 years. In fact, we're staying in their house right now. They're off on a vacation while we're house sitting their home. And I said, her name, I won't tell you what her name is, but I said, I can't believe how I was back in the beginning. And she was probably on the path 5 years longer than me when we first started out. So she was new too. 5 years is very new still. And she said, oh, Dharmini, the same for me. The same for me. I just don't know either how anyone put up with me either. And I remember how she was when we first came on the path. We ended up working together and I had to force her to eat lunch. Otherwise she would space out and make all these mistakes and confuse all the time. So I would make sure she ate her lunch every day. She doesn't need that anymore. And I always knew, despite having to bug her about eating lunch and not being spacey, I always knew there was a saint inside of her. And I see her now and I'm so touched by her dedication and devotion and love of Master that has kept her steadfast on this path probably, 30 years. Actually, before Ananda, she was with another path. So she might have been on the path 40 years. She's not a spring chicken. And, we have another very close friend who I would consider a saint now. And there's two different things. There's our spiritual vibration and there's our personality. And the personality is the part that gets irritated and wishes things were different than they were and complains and reacts. But the soul, the spiritual part of us, is always striving. And once we become Kriya Yogis, we are striving for God as best we can. And sometimes the personality overshadows that. Sometimes we look at someone who might be going through a hard time and just say, oh my God, where's their spirituality? I just see something irritating. I was mentioning this one friend. She is a very dear, dear soul, kind heart, pure heart, very pure-hearted. And yet she can be a chatterbox. And she talks so much, I find myself being overstimulated after about an hour. And I have to, either excuse myself or just take a deep breath. But what I do now, because before I would allow myself to kind of get irritated by that, what I do now is I'll kind of allow what's being said to kind of fade out, because I don't know how much she wants me to hear every detail, but she just wants someone to hear. So I'll kind of let all the words fade out and I will tune into her vibration and I will feel bliss. I feel the bliss of her soul. And it's so touching to feel that bliss. And that is what spiritual family is. we tune into each other's souls. We don't lower our energy and try and become best friends and hey buddy or anything like that. We don't do that. That puts people in boxes when we're so personal with each other that we think, oh, well, I know you. But instead, if there's a slight distance, a respectful distance, that allows the other person to grow into the saint they're meant to be. And if we can maintain that distance, then we can grow into the saint we're supposed to be. And, you know, a good example is in family, we very often wonder what everyone is thinking about us. You know, first of all, are they seeing us the way we want them to see us? Because if they put us in a little box, they might see us in a diminished way that we don't like. But also, what was I saying?
Family that we want them to, we're wondering what they're thinking about us.
Right. Wondering. Sorry, I felt so good I forgot what I was saying. This worrying about what other people are thinking about us runs through all of us very deeply. And when we are a slave to that worry about what other people are thinking, how can we be free in ourselves at all? How? We can't. And when we are feeling that slave way, then we become more reactive. We lash out at people, or they lash out at us when we have that kind of too close of a connection. And so it's very important to just keep a distance, and also just to allow ourselves to feel our own inner reality and to let go what others are thinking. You know, I remember in the early days, I would feel tortured by, if I had a argument with one of my sisters, I would feel tortured and driven to talk until we could work it out, you know? And now it's different. If there's a conflict, it's like, okay, you know what? You go off and you go and center yourself. I'll go and center myself. And let's talk later, once emotions have calmed down, once we're no longer blaming each other, that's the time to talk. But that emotion has to calm down first. Otherwise, there'll just be fireworks again. So with my family, I refuse to argue now. I will not argue with my family anymore, because growing up, we all argued all the time. And I felt miserable as a child with so much arguing in the family. I was so sensitive that every time there was an argument, I just felt so stressed. And my response to it was to join in and try and stop it. But now I detach, and I just, if someone wants to be really upset, they need to go off and be upset. If they're blaming me for being upset, they still need to calm down before I let them talk to me. And then once that calming down has happened, then we're open. Once the blame is not there anymore, once the yelling is not a possibility anymore, I just refuse to have that. And sometimes my sisters have gotten mad at me for stepping back a little bit and taking my space, because they feel still that one should just hang in there until it's argued out. But now they've learned that I take a step back and I'm not going to argue. And then when things are calm, then we work it out. So this is very important to understand in spiritual family, because the more we get to know each other, the more there will be a tendency to try to relax and kind of behave like regular family. But don't let it happen, because let's not forget why we're here. We're here at Ananda to meditate together and find God. And we're here in this life to find God alone. And it's an added benefit to have spiritual family, because it's so supportive to have others who have the same similarities and beliefs as we do, reinforcing each other. But we have to do that in harmony only. We can't just do it like some relaxed family. We have to do it with respect, with inner attunement to Master, and also seeing each other as our soul is, and not just how the personality is. We need to transcend. Transcending is doing that. And meditation is the only way to be able to do that. It's very difficult to think your way into transcendence. It's very difficult. But it can only take 5 minutes in meditation to transcend. So just remember, when the first inclination is to strike out or to judge or to be irritated or annoyed, remember, those are feelings that live inside us. We can't blame other people for those feelings we have inside. Other people might do something and it gives us an opportunity to strike out or do whatever, but it's not their fault. If anger lives inside, if anxiety lives inside, if judgmentalness and criticalness lives inside, our mind only needs an excuse to bring that out. But meditation will root all of these things out. Over time, we become much less critical, much less angry, much less anxious and afraid. So all we can do is say, I will just day by day keep on the path, keep on the meditation. I'm not going to judge myself and say, oh, that wasn't like the best meditation or anything like that. I'm going to just keep stepping forward, and I'm going to give others the benefit of the doubt that they also are doing their best and that they also are striving towards God. I remember once I had this very deep and beautiful meditation, and when I came out of that meditation, I felt such deep joy that everyone around me was going to be free in God someday. And we want to have that happiness and joy for others, that they too are going to be free in God also. And how lucky we are to be in a temple full of other people who want God. It's low percentages out in the world, you know. Sometimes we're in the grocery store, we see one other person across the way who has light in their eyes. Or at work, we're lucky if we have one person we can talk to at work who also loves God or somehow likes God or something. And so all we have to do is just keep stepping, putting one foot in front of the other each day, and allowing God to guide our every step, and also tuning in so we can learn how to transcend even better day by day. God bless. Here comes Dharmarajan.
So I could stay and answer questions if you want.
No, I'll be here.
Okay, we'll stay a little bit.
Okay.
All right. Okay, so we wanted to give you a chance to ask a few questions. It is rather late, our time here, but we did want to ask if you excuse me, if you had any questions.
Nope.
Okay, no.
Not a question, but just a comment that we are glad about the Murthy message that you shared, Dharmini. So we're looking forward to seeing that.
Isn't that special?
The what?
Yeah.
Yes.
The
Mortis?
for those of you who hadn't heard, do you want to?
No.
Oh, just that we for Swamiji's birthday, we had the idea to and the opportunity to bring back larger Murtis of Master and Babaji. They're quite big. They do fit in a big suitcase.
They're not as big as in Delhi, because those are hundreds of pounds.
No.
We wouldn't be able to do
We
that.
would need to put them in a car and drive it to India. These will fit in a suitcase. But it was very also inspiring to see everyone's response. Already more than half of the cost has come in through many different donations that people have made. So we have enough for one Murti, and so now we're looking to see if the rest will come in for the second one. It'll be a joy to have them, and maybe, who knows, maybe next year we can bring 2 more back of 2 of the other masters and so on. But it was sort of an idea that hit right on Swamiji's birthday, so it'll be an exciting thing for the center.
It'll be very nice also to bring them in and have a blessing for them and be able to give them flowers and touch their feet, things like that.
Anyone else? Yes.
Not a question, but can you share how is it going about the Kriyaman retreat over there? How's the experience? How are the talks?
Yeah, it began on Thursday with a few sort of smaller events, one of which was a sort of celebration of the crystal clarity of the publication part of the work here, and they announced the publication of this book, which is, if you can see it there, it was originally called Stories of Mukunda. It's by Swamiji. They retitled it, as you can see, Stories of Yogananda's Youth. And so this book will be coming out in the fall here in the U.S. and hopefully soon.
Hopefully in India.
Soon.
Also.
Anything that comes out in the U.S. usually then comes out in India.
It's written by Swami or Master.
If the design is all ready and everything, and as she said. So that was exciting news. It's actually the first book Swamiji ever wrote. And so he was in SRF at the time, and so it was out of print for a long time, and so now it's back in print. Then we had the morning class on Kriya with Jyotishji and Deviji. You saw the photos. Those of you in the group saw the photos of that. Nayaswamis Savitri chanting in the beginning. And then classes on Kriya, and then Swamiji's birthday celebration, which many of you attended online. And then this morning, more classes on Kriya. Devarshi, Gyandev Ji, and Dhyanaji gave the class this morning. And then we had a Kriya initiation this evening. And so it's been a very sacred time, and something that we are doing in India as well. We have these, we are having a Kriya Brahman retreat in June in Pune. And it's again sort of an echo of this, where we can try to gather from all over India as many who can come to the retreat in Pune. And again, if you're working towards Kriya, then let this be an additional motivation for you. And you see there are some Kriya bonds in the room, and they did manage to find a way to meditate 90 minutes a day without dropping dead or having to quit their jobs. And so you will too. And so for all of us, it was a struggle at first, myself certainly included. And then in time it becomes easier and easier. Just keep going, and on the one hand feel big motivation, and on the other hand don't pressure yourself so much. Take your time. So it's been a wonderful time. Tomorrow is Sunday service, and then that's when the whole weekend will close. Sai Ram.
Actually, you're all worried about Dharmini.
we left for years, and now we feel so happy to see such change.
Yeah, who knows what the karma is? Not my favorite kind of karma to have. But what can I do? Just feel sorry for myself? I can't. So I'm actually going through a difficult astrological time. I wish I could say, oh, I'm just protected no matter what, but maybe the planets are affecting me. Hard to know. We sometimes just have karmic things happen, and unfortunately Swamiji was ill a lot, but he was probably taking on other people's karma. I cannot claim that at all. So I must just have a lot of my own karma that I'm working through. But it's very nice to see you too. I really missed you. I was not glad about not seeing you before we left, and then I still had to recover a little bit when we got here also. So it's been very good to be here. The weather is very cool. It's probably 20 degrees, and at night a little colder. Yeah, Sairam is saying, don't say it.
Don't rub it in. Yeah.
I heard it reached 41. I hope it wasn't 41 today. Was it?
Not today.
Only 40 today.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm so sorry. Well, we're just blessed in India to have air conditioners. And, all we can do is just hope and pray that the power plant continues to send the electricity our way. So,
just to echo one thing that she said, Daviji shared a story which I think you would have seen on the broadcast, but just to repeat it, that when Swamiji was sick and people would say, are you taking on people's karma? He would say no, or he would just push that thought aside. But near the end of his life, once somebody asked him when he was particularly ill and there was a difficult thing going on in one of the communities, someone said, Swamiji, are you taking on people's karma? And he was quiet for a time, and then he said, we all have to do our part. And that's another thing that the Guru does for us, that we just can't even know how much he's helping us, how much he's protecting us. We do see it sometimes in that people find that, I don't really want to say it, but I've already started down this road, so I'll have to finish it. But basically, I would see sometimes people in the ashram take that protection for granted. And then they would say, life is so easy, I think I'll go off now on my own and do such and such. And suddenly they found life got very hard. Yeah. And in that way they realized how much they were being protected, even though they didn't see it at the time. And in the happy stories, the people just came right back and said, well, that I would rather be here in the protection. So don't doubt how much Master, how much Swamiji, how much satsang of others is a great protection for you. And I know you are all appreciative and you value it, but we can sometimes get into moods, or we can sometimes think, why don't I take some time away and so on. And if our life circumstances draw us away, that's one thing. But always try to keep the company of Master here when you come, also at home with the books or with photos or whatever. And then we find the path, though a great challenge, relatively speaking, is quite easy.
There was a woman in Los Angeles who was a psychic, and not that we would seek out to talk to psychics, but she would often tell people, who was around them, and very often, your mother is with you who passed on, or your father is always watching over you, or whatever. And so I asked her, who do you see? And she did not know Ananda. I met her outside of Ananda. She didn't know I was part of Ananda. She didn't know anything. She said, well, there's a man who is elderly. He's dressed in blue. And there's another man who has long hair in an orange robe. And so this is what's going on for all of us, And like Dharmarajan said, don't take for granted being here at the at the ashram. And it's tempting sometimes to just not visit sometimes. But just remember that the protection that is given through the blessing and coming to, not the ashram, but the temple, coming to the temple is a way of just reconnecting. And there's no obligation when you come to the temple to talk to anyone. If you feel like you need to be in silence, be in silence. And you could even wear, we used to have little name tags that would say, please excuse me, I'm in silence. And so if you feel you need to come and you need to just feel free to be silent. And some people are already more quiet than others, Bhaskar. But then others, so it's okay to be quieter. If you feel like you need to talk, it's okay to talk too. But suppose you come and you're in a mood, right? Sometimes one of the reasons we say we shouldn't come to the temple is because we're feeling in a bad mood and we don't want to stink up the place with our bad mood, with a dark cloud or whatever. And yes, others will be able to sense it. But if we're quiet and in our own spines, our purpose for coming, even if we're in a bad mood, is to be uplifted. So that's a good thing. So don't ever stay away just because you're in a bad mood either. If you're in a bad mood, just be more quiet, just be more reserved so that you can work on the bad mood inside. And then you find out after just being at the temple a short time, suddenly the mood has lifted. So don't allow that to keep you away. It's very important. This, like I said, it's not a social club. We're not coming to appear a certain way to anybody. We're here to grow and find God. And that includes the ups and the downs that happen. And the ups and downs are fine. Just when we're in a down, make sure we're self-contained so we're not kicking other people in the head also. It happens sometimes. Being in spiritual community for 25 years, we've seen it all. Let's just put it that way. We have seen it all. And so people who will have feuds for years and blah, blah, blah. Sooner or later it just all, if someone is working on themselves, it all melts away. So in the moment it feels dramatic and horrible. And then you look at it 5 years from there and you go, oh yeah, that used to happen. That doesn't happen anymore. Some new drama happens instead. Some new drama to get upset about happens again. So we don't need to get caught up in that. Instead, just come to the temple to be uplifted, to reconnect with the soul if we're especially needing to, even when we're not doing okay also.
So thank you again all for coming. It's such a joy to see everybody and to see, your faces and to see everybody from all different levels, as we say. It's nice on Sunday satsang because everybody, no matter what class they're in, all can get together and be together in the same way. And that's a very joyful strengthening of the spiritual community as well. And so next week will be Anantaji and Mariaji. They are long-time members of Ananda, and they were the leaders of Ananda's community in Sacramento for at least 20 years. And they live here now at the village. We saw them just on Thursday, and Dhyanaji was there too, and she said to them, well, I'm going back to India on Monday. And Anantaji said, that's fine, we're doing Sunday satsang in Chennai on Sunday. And so, but of course through Skype. But so they're looking forward to seeing you all. And that'll be very special. So please don't miss it. It'll be a nice chance to get to interact with them. Okay? Okay, God bless you all. Save some mudaka for us. And we'll be back soon. Okay.
God bless you, everybody. So nice to see your faces. And it's been nice to stay in touch on WhatsApp.
Yes. This time it wasn't like you left at all. I mean, every year it's becoming more and more closer that we are being more comforted that you are around on the phone this time.
So you hear that? You heard what he said? You might need to repeat that. No, I'm just kidding. Because some people have... What we tried to make that case to somebody, and they said, no, every year it's harder and harder because... so, it's easier and easier. Just ask Prasanna. So, okay.
Okay.
We miss you, and we'll see you soon.
See you soon. We're more than halfway through the trip, so we're almost home.
Okay. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.